For NFL Week 18, we got 2 games on tap for Saturday, January 6th, and I have my 4 favorite player props for these 2 games. Despite only having 2 games, there were 4 plays that I really liked, 3 of which are of the long shot plus money banger variety, with 1 mainline play that I'm playing for a full unit. Before I can give you picks for Saturday, I do need to do a recap from the last video we had, which was a long time ago. It was for Thursday Night Football last week. Unfortunately, that video did not do great. Now, I gave out 2 picks and we went 1-1 on those picks, but because both were for minus money, we end the day with a slightly down 0.14 or so units. That brings our total profit season to date since I started doing the pumped up props in week 7. We are up 13.24 units with an ROI of 6.41%. I won't lie, it's been a pretty brutal cold streak over the past month or so on these NFL player props. Hopefully, we can end the season with a bang. And let's get right into it. So the first game that we're going to go ahead and talk about is the Colts versus Texans game. And our full 1 unit play is on CJ Stroud over 255.5 passing yards. This is at minus 113 odds at BetRivers. So first off, the thing I want to mention first, the value that we are getting on BetRivers is absolutely incredible, both in terms of the price that we're taking it at, meaning the odds, and the yardage number as well. So again, we're taking over 255.5 passing yards. We're taking that at minus 113 odds. Let's look at the other sports books. Caesars is pricing this over under at 256.5, so a yard higher, but they're pricing the over at minus 131, pretty heavily favoring the over. DraftKings prices his over under at 257.5, again, pretty heavily favoring the over at minus 130 odds at a number that is 2 yards higher. Then we move on to FanDuel. FanDuel prices CJ Stroud's over under passing yards at 263.5, a full 8 yards higher, and they are pricing it at minus 114. So this price at BetRivers is very, very good. Now, in terms of the actual play itself, obviously, everybody knows that CJ Stroud has been incredible as a rookie, significantly better than the number 1 overall pick, Bryce Young. On the year, CJ Stroud has gone over this number in 8 of 14 games. But the reason why I like it for Saturday, the matchup's good, and we're gonna get into that. We're also fading recent results. If you look at the past 2 games, they have not been great for CJ Stroud. 2 games ago, which was about a month ago because he got hurt in that game, he only passed for 91 yards against the Jets. He got concussed in that game. It was also a horrible weather game. It was windy and it was rainy, really bad. Then he missed a couple weeks, and his first week back from injury was last week against the Titans. In that game, he went under, only passing for 213 yards. But with that said, you need to look at the game script of that game. The Texans were winning 20-3 at halftime, and they ended up winning the game 26-3. So CJ Stroud basically didn't need to do anything in the second half. The Titans had Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, who is terrible. So CJ Stroud did the majority of his damage in the first half, was basically able to sit the second half out. I do not expect that to be the case for this game. Number 1, the Colts are way better than the Titans, and they're way better than the Titans who are starting Ryan Tannehill. Also, this is essentially a playoff game. For both of these teams, this applies to both the Colts and the Texans. The winner makes the playoffs. The loser does not. It's essentially a playoff game. Win and move on, lose and go home. And I mentioned, the Colts are way better than the Titans. The last time these 2 teams played, CJ Stroud threw for 384 yards. Granted, that was with a healthy Tank Dell, but still, he had an incredible game. I'm not quite expecting that type of performance, but I do think he's going to have a good game. You can throw against the Colts. 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks against the Colts have gone over their passing yardage over under. So I like for Stroud to have a good game in this one. Hopefully he can come through for us as our biggest play of the night. Next up, same game, we're taking Nico Collins, 100 plus receiving yards. This is at plus 225 odds at FanDuel. And this is going to be a half unit play. So we're unit sizing this one down because it is a long shot. And I like obviously the mainline play for Stroud a lot. But this is obviously correlated with our CJ Stroud play. If CJ Stroud passes for a bunch of yards, somebody's got to be on the receiving end of them, of course. In this case, I think it's going to be Nico Collins. He's been awesome for the Texans this year. Now, he has missed time due to injury, but overall, he has cleared 100 or more receiving yards in 4 games so far this year, including the game against the Colts in which he had 146 receiving yards. CJ Stroud went off in that game, as did Nico Collins. Last week, Nico Collins played well. He went over his main line receiving yards, and he had 80 receiving yards as well. And again, that's despite the fact that the Texans barely threw in the second half. Collins did the majority of his damage in the first half. If that game was remotely close, if the Titans were able to score, he probably would have cleared 100 yards based on how things were going in the first half. And as I mentioned, you can throw on the Colts. On the year, 6 receivers have cleared 100 yards against the Colts. Again, that includes Nico Collins, who did it the first time these two teams played. Just last week, both Raiders starting receivers went over their receiving yards over under. That was Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. And also, by the way, Devontae Adams had 126 receiving yards last week against the Colts. So I like for Nico Collins to have a bunch of receiving yards for our second play, a long shot play. Next up, same game, same player. We're actually taking Nico Collins anytime touchdown. This is at plus 160 odds at BetMGM. This is going to be another half unit play for me, not putting the full unit on this one. Now, I got to say, I knew once I was targeting CJ Stroud because the value was so good. I looked at Nico Collins. We got really good value in his receiving yards as well. When I looked at the anytime touchdown market, and I looked at the odds on OddsJam across the books for every player, I wasn't expecting to be on Nico Collins, but the value we got on him was so good that I didn't want to pass up on this opportunity. Now, let me explain that. BetMGM, again, we're locking this in at plus 160 odds. The closest book that is currently offering odds on a Nico Collins touchdown is ESPN Bet, and that's all the way down at plus 135. And again, that's the closest book. Every other book is below them. Caesars has this at plus 125. FanDuel has this at plus 115. DraftKings has this at plus 130. So similar to the CJ Stroud yards play, this is a very good play from a positive expected value, line shopping value play when you look at all of the sports books. In terms of the analysis, I'll keep this one brief since we talked about Nico a ton, obviously. So he scored in 6 games so far this year. In the game in which he blew up against the Colts, he also scored in that game as well. He leads the Texans in red zone targets. He also leads the Texans in targets inside the 5, he's tied with Noah Brown, leading the Texans in targets inside the 5-yard line. But he has 3 touchdowns on those targets. Noah Brown only has 1. In the running back rotation for the Texans, it's hard to trust. Some days it's Dameon Pierce. Some days it's Devin Singletary. I don't trust any of them. So I think the value on Nico Collins to score is pretty good. Hopefully, Nico Collins has a good game, cashing a bunch of bangers for us, including our third play. Last up in the other game, Steelers versus Ravens. I'm taking Najee Harris, anytime touchdown, plus 150 odds at FanDuel. Now, this game, I'll admit, was a little bit tough to project because the Ravens, they already have the 1 seed locked up. And because of that, they're resting essentially everybody that's important. That includes Lamar Jackson, who will not be playing in this game. Instead, Pro Bowl quarterback Tyler Huntley will be starting the game for the Ravens. And outside of that, we don't know who's going to be sitting and who is not, but we do know that every important player on the Ravens is either going to sit out or is maybe going to play a drive. Because of that, the Steelers are 4-point favorites, despite the fact that the Ravens are obviously the significantly better team. The Steelers still have a chance to make the playoffs. Now, they're going to need some help, but if they win this game, it's possible that they will be in the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Ravens already have the 1 seed locked up. So that's the reason why the Steelers are favored. And even if they end up losing, at least this game is most likely to be close. So right off the bat, we're not expecting this game to be a Ravens blowout. We're actually expecting the Steelers to win this game, or at least have it be close enough where they're not going to completely abandon the run game. And what the Steelers have done recently is they have fed Najee Harris. He's got 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He scored twice. Last game, he scored once the game before that. And overall, he's got 7 touchdowns in his last 12 games. That includes a 3-game stretch in December where he wasn't getting a ton of work. He wasn't getting a lot of snaps for whatever reason. He didn't score in any of those 3 games. those 3 games seem to be an outlier. If you look at before and after that 3-game stretch, his carries, his snap percentage is a lot better. So if you take those 3 out, that's 7 touchdowns in 9 games. He also gets fed the ball when the Steelers get in the red zone. He's pretty much doubling up the workload of Jaylen Warren in the red zone. Inside the 20, Najee Harris has 38 carries to Jaylen Warren's 18. Inside the 10, Najee has 18 carries to Jaylen Warren's 7. Inside the 5, Najee Harris has 10 carries for 5 touchdowns, while Jaylen Warren has 4 carries for 0 touchdowns. So, all in all, this game on Saturday represents a great opportunity for Najee Harris to score. Hopefully he does. Hopefully all 3 of the other plays cash as well, so we can have a great day after a brutal cold streak. And that's all I got. 4 plays for Saturday Night Football for you guys to lock in. If you are riding with me, make sure to comment and let me know. Other than that, remember to like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. Appreciate everybody for watching, and have a good one.